Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creative Live. I'm your host, Kenna Klosterman, and I am here for another episode of Creative Live TV. Today, we are filming another episode of our podcast here at Creative Live called We Are Photographers, where we take you behind the scenes, behind the lives with photographers, filmmakers, industry game changers, and find out their stories. There's something to learn from everyone's story, and man, you've got a lot to learn and get excited about today with today's guest. His name is Omari Salisbury, also known as Big O, the Big O. And my goodness, he's the COO and founder of Converge Media. We live in Seattle, and if you live in Seattle, you definitely know Omari, but I know he's got followers from all over the world. He has been at the forefront of citizen journalism during the Black Lives Matter protests here in Seattle that has gone, viral all over the world. And he is also the son of the first Black-owned photography studio here in the Pacific Northwest. His son, we're going to talk about, also a visual storyteller, just a long line of knowing media in his bones. He has traveled and worked 52 countries plus, from the Arab world to Africa, and we have so many wonderful stories to hear from Omari. But his hometown is Seattle here, like the rest of us, and we're super excited to have him on today. So please help me welcome Mr. Omari Salisbury. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Wow, thank you. What an amazing introduction, by the way. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I have so many questions for you, but the way that I want to start this is, first of all, by inviting everybody who is tuning in live. If you are tuning in on creativelive.com/TV, you can see the little chat icon that's up on the top right. That allows you to interact with us here, ask questions for Omari throughout the broadcast. And as well, if you're on Facebook or Twitter, you can comment there as well, but I will definitely see those ones coming in on Creative Live TV first. So we'd love to give shout outs, starting by letting us know where it is that you are tuning in from all over the world. So Omari is here in Seattle. And Omari, I just would love to start before we kind of go back in time in your story, let's start with today. May 29th, everything broke out here in Seattle. You're at the front lines, you are live streaming. And now, fast forward, you and Converge Media have become sort of this CNN of Seattle on the ground. So take us through the story.
Well, it's interesting enough, and I'll start that day on the 29th, because I think probably later in the show when you ask me what led up to that, then that very same day, hours before. But so basically on the 29th, saw the protests were occurring. That was a Friday. It was kind of smaller, but it wasn't too far from my house. And, I'd had a blog that I've been writing just about news in our neighborhood, mostly about gentrification and things like that, and other things of public interest around the Black community. And I saw that the protest was actually leading into the International District, which years ago, much of the International District, when you go back in time, was part of the Central District in Seattle, where a Black population is. So I thought that it would be relevant to a small group of readers, to go down there and cover it and see what happens. I never did live before. Because my background is really more writing and photography, and I'd never done live. I'd even do a video, upload it or something. And oddly enough, I was all the major media had left once the police had dispersed the crowd. And that first day, it was just a few flashbangs. It was more like the police waited out people, and they left. Well, the police had left, and I still was down there in International District, and I happened to see this group of, I got to be careful how I label them, because, everybody keeps telling me, don't say this or don't say that because of whatever, but I'll just say it was a band of people up to no good. And I was the only camera there. And they went for 45 minutes. They kicked in the Bank of America. They kicked in Washington Federal. They tore the International District up, and I caught it all on film. You know what I'm saying? Live, all on film. And I followed them for 1.4 miles through downtown Seattle. The police didn't stop them, didn't arrest them, didn't do anything. From South Seattle to, I guess you would say, the right in the heart of Seattle. And two things happened is that, I wrote an article like I intended to do, just put it up on my blog, and also put up a video, but I put up a side note kind of out to the ID, the International District, and that's, also known as Chinatown, Little Saigon, Japantown, and that, hey, don't believe the hype. It's not black thugs from our neighborhood that came and tore up your neighborhood, because the video shows these are all young white kids that were just tearing up everything. Because a lot of times that's a common misnomer that, these black kids, gang members, go to the International District and do whatever. And so that the video was really enlightening in a lot of different ways. But it was just me covering something, went live, had like 60 people. For me, it was a big deal. I go live. I'm always guaranteed 2 people if I go live, my mom, my dad. I'm like, man, I got an audience of 2. This is great. It's like 60 people the first night. So I felt real accomplished. I was like, man, people actually, they want to see if I go live. And, that article that I wrote in that video, through no means of myself or anything, just posted it. It just got into people's hands and it moved. And it wasn't until days later that I actually realized how big or how out there was. The next day was when all hell broke loose in downtown Seattle, and went down there again just to cover it. I was with my son and we're like, yeah, well, let's just see what happens. And I mean, that's the day. It was 4 or 5 police cars on fire, flashbangs everywhere, tear gas everywhere, pepper spray. And, I just kept the camera rolling and on a live. And, when you're live, you never really know where it's going. I mean, you might see a number count, but after a while, you don't even notice that because you're trying to shoot. And we were really in the funk, so they're throwing flashbangs, they're getting hit with flashbang, grenade, shrapnel, and this and that. And you're trying to breathe and all these things. And again, just covering it. And one of the interesting things real quick about that day is, so I was on one side of a block and my son was on the other. And he's never been in anything like that. He's a tough guy, but he had never been in anything like that. And this is where the cars were burning there on the police cruisers on 6th Avenue. And the officers threw tear gas canisters basically in between us because he's on one side of the block and I'm on the other side of the other. This boy runs through the tear gas, comes and grabs me, pulls me back over to where he's at. He's like, Dad, I was worried about you, this and that. And we inhale so much tear gas that we get to the end of the block and some medics are there. We both can't see. And I actually have a video of the people that pour milk in our eyes and all kinds of stuff and everything else. And that was my son's welcoming basically to protest season. I had covered a few protests before, but it was nothing like that. And, again, being on the ground and not being into SEO and who this and that and these platforms and Twitch and everything else, I'm just like, man, I just live streamed. We got the stuff out our eyes and eventually went home. And, it wasn't until really 3 days later that I even realized that people were paying attention to me. And what had happened is that was what we in Seattle, we call the flashpoint or the pink umbrella day.
Yep.
And that was now a Monday, and we're there on Capitol Hill. And what had happened, just for the viewers out there, is that peaceful protesters tried to pass the East Precinct several times on 12th and Pine. And I was in that group and covered it. And time again, the Seattle Police Department did not allow access on Pine Street. And a lot of people for a lot of different ways. And it's not just people who people say leftists and protesters. There's also people on the libertarian side. Like, why are you blocking the streets? These are the people's streets. And so on Sunday, they block access plenty of times. And on that Monday, thousands of people came up there to Capitol Hill, and I found myself right there in the front of the protest at the barricade. And again, the police didn't allow access, and we see in the flashpoint, I'm there on video, and it was amazing on video, which is a whole nother story and a different show. But, as a young kid, I was beat up. I was a victim of police brutality in the city of Seattle. It's a whole organization that started over that. But, you put that to the side, you put whatever, because you're in a professional capacity. So whatever feelings I might have about the SPD or my personal experience, that kind of goes into a box because you need to be able to do your job. So I sat there on the barricade and I'm trying to de-escalate. I'm like, hey guys, let's bring it up. Talking to the police, talking to the protesters. Police grab a pink umbrella, and the woman, actually, I had her on my podcast. The woman Liz, whose pink umbrella was being grabbed, she goes back and forth, and I'll be honest with you, all hell breaks loose. And we caught that. So I'm there and I'm just shooting that. And you know, and I get maced, I get tear gassed. It was almost to a point, you know, people, my mom was so concerned because I'm on tape live. And that's the crazy thing about live streaming. I'm like, I can't breathe. You know, you could hear me gasping and gasping, but clearly I lived. But what happened is that, and I didn't realize it at the time. Finally, we get cleared up, go downtown, and I get home, and I just clipped out that segment right before the pink umbrella and everything happening. I didn't realize that the Seattle Police Department was less than ingenuous. They said that the protesters started a riot. And that's what they released to the public, and that's what the mayor's office said. But it was my footage that was right there because I was standing right next to the pink umbrella. And the next thing I know is like I'm getting all these like national, international, everybody that's like they're all on the footage. But one thing I omitted, once I'm filming and we're getting hit by the tear gas and hit by everything, I go on Twitter because we're live streaming from another phone, and I go on Twitter. And actually, no, I'd only had one phone then. And by the way, all of this I'm talking about was just on one red iPhone 8 that was 3-4 years old. And so when people sitting like, oh, I have to wait for this camera and this light and this grip and this mic, if I would have waited for that, I wouldn't be on here right now. You do what you can with what you have. All I had was this red iPhone. So in my comments, I'm like, tweet the mayor, hashtag calm it down. And I'm saying, calm it down. And thousands of people, this is when I realized how many people were actually on the stream. Thousands of people started tweeting the mayor and the chief of police because they saw this for themselves. And people in Seattle, especially in that neighborhood, you know, downtown Seattle, a lot of downtowns you see protests. But in this residential neighborhood, and this is where like a lot of white progressive people, well-to-do live, these are people who could never imagine tear gas and pepper spray and rubber bullets. And so on the stream, I'm like, hashtag calm it down, you know, tweet the mayor. And thousands of people were like, man, there's journalists over there. They're getting gassed and this and that, calm it down. And the hashtag calm it down went all across the city. And the police literally calmed it down. You know, I'm not saying that like Omari made the police change, but it was a big impact. And we actually, in that stream quite a few times when the force got excessive, the next day I got shot with 2 rubber bullets, calm it down. And so many people hopped on the stream and were like, yo, and they were tweeting their public officials and everything. But we went from what we call that pink umbrella area, that was the Western Barricade. And so we went from the Western Barricade for 8 days. Protesters came there every day and almost every day got smacked by the police, tear gassed, rubber bullets, pushed back and everything else. Excuse me. And on the 8th day, Seattle Police Department abandoned. And no one can still tell us who gave the order, but Seattle Police Department abandoned the East Precinct. And that's what led to the creation of the Chaz and the Chop.
Wow. I mean, I was going to ask you about some of those instances that happened in terms of, you know, getting tear gas, getting, you know, all of it yourself. And you just brought us there. And I mean, that's the thing of what you have been doing is not just brought us there in retelling it now, like you brought people there live, and that actually then changed things. And what I so appreciate about the way that you've gone about that is that you're just telling the story, as you were saying, with no bias, with no judgment. You're just showing it. And the fact that we can do that now means that people, you know, there can't be that, you know, that bias when you're just showing the truth.
Right. And, you know, and the thing is, and so a lot of things changed right away. Yep. City of Seattle wasn't used to seeing this in a residential neighborhood. I mean, people, you know, May Day, Seattle's big for the May Day thing before COVID. Downtown gets torn up every year and people are used to seeing that. But people weren't used to seeing it. And for people who don't know, and there's a lot of misconceptions around there, people who live in Capitol Hill, a lot of them are first responders and doctors and nurses because, well, First Hill, another area, is very close to here. A lot of people work at Facebook and Google. These are bartenders. This is also Seattle's Arts District. So these are people, big LGBTQ community. These are people who work every day, you know what I'm saying, pay into the community and the taxes and everything else, who are getting smacked on that barricade every day. And the people of Seattle couldn't believe it. They absolutely couldn't believe it. And the first thing that happened is that my footage was in a lawsuit filed by the ACLU, and the federal court, the Western District of Washington, would put a temporary restraining order on tear gas. And so, there was a restraining order that actually came out of that. The second thing that came out of that is now in the city of Seattle, less than lethal munitions are illegal. Rubber bullets and things like that are illegal. And so it takes different tactics. And not to even get ahead in the story, but which was pretty amazing, when the Seattle Police Department cleared the CHOP, there was only one release of one less than lethal item, which was one rubber bullet. And they cleared that whole CHOP, guns and everything's in it, with no tear gas, no anything. But what happened is being there on the ground, and then every day being able to, maybe it's a gift, maybe it's part of the job, I press reset every day. So even though on that Monday I got tear gassed, I got pepper sprayed, and on that first video was a lot of profanity because we didn't expect to see that coming. I couldn't breathe, medics, everything. The next day I was out there and actually interviewed the police the next day. Hey guys, what's up with this and that? And so many of the interviews that I have are actually with the police officers on the front line. And I think that was important in storytelling when we got such a big audience, is because, man, you know what? Yesterday, my mama always says that forgiveness is giving up all hope for a better past. I got gassed yesterday, but hey, guess what? Today's a new day. And we're going to sit out here and we're going to talk to these Seattle police officers, and we're going to talk to these protesters. And it got to a point where even the Seattle Police Department saw a lot of fairness in the reporting. And I thought that one thing that could happen is protesters, we only see sitting on one side of the barricade. The protesters and the journalists only see one view. And I say, and the thing is what's missing in our city is perspective. What's missing in our city is point of view. I say all the time, like, man, we don't have to agree, but you know what? We can make a commitment to understand. And so on the stream, I called out the chief, Chief Best. I said, man, it would really be good if the protesters and the people of the city of Seattle can see what the police see. Chief Best came up to the East Precinct, called me on my phone. I'm streaming, so I'm sending the chief the voicemail, and the chief called my mama. It's 11 o'clock at night, and you could imagine if the chief of police is calling your mom at 11 o'clock, she's assuming the worst. My mama's 73, 74 years old. It's like, oh. So they called my son, who's sitting next to me, he's like, he's 19. He's like, yeah, the police lady's on the phone. And it's like, well, man, we're inviting you around. So me and O, we walk 2 blocks up and we enter into the police lines. And with this streaming phone, and by the way, everybody, this is this red iPhone 6, it's 3.5 years old, and the processor is slow and everything. But sometimes you got to use what you have. You know what I'm saying? And do the best with it. And I follow the Chief Best, and we go and we see the National Guard and we get a tour. But the thing is that we're looking now and seeing the same vantage point that the officers see. And you come to find out that the police can't really see much. Mm. And you think, as on the protest side, you're thinking, oh, the police can see you, this and that, because these umbrellas are up and everything. They can only see a few feet in front of them. And, what the outcome of that, it didn't change the tide or anything, but the outcome of it was the next day when I interviewed people in the park, and there's something they would say, I wouldn't even ask them. They would be like, hey, when you put the camera and show the police perspective, it's the first time I felt empathy for the police. And that's when we realized that it's like, if we can use this camera to show more viewpoints and just show points of perspective without a bias either way, but just show point of perspective, people intuitively who really are seeking good solutions will take that and be like, okay, at least I understand more now.
I mean, that is, you said it so much more eloquently than I was saying, in that, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about, I feel like, about this independent as citizen journalism, where and not just that, but then there's add layer you on top of that, because I mean, you mentioned it earlier, like maybe, what is it about you that you're able to keep your calm, that you're able to talk to anybody, that you're able to just be able to be that mediator, I would say. I mean, that, like you said, that is the role of a journalist. But I'm curious to kind of go back in time and take us to how you got to this point today, because you do have a very lengthy media background. Can we go back in time to your dad and the photography portion of his history as a historian, photographer, documentarian?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because we actually talked about that on the morning show. And I would just say this one thing here for some people that haven't seen the stream, where when she's talking about is, yeah, there was times there on when the barricade was there, but even on the stream there was times where protesters were pointing guns and AK-47s at themselves, and we're just standing there and being like, "Bring it down." You know what I'm saying? Which was, my mom wasn't happy about that, but we sat there quite a few times and mediated. But you know, it's a real interesting story. And the first part I'll kind of breeze through, but it's important, is that my grandfather, James Salisbury Sr., you know, he served in World War II, and when he was over in World War II, he picked up Flora Bokeh camera. It's a German camera, you know, back then exceptional, an amazing lens. This is in the 40s. And, you know, when he landed there in New York, when the boat arrived in New York, you know what I'm saying, even though he was in his dress uniform, you know, the ugliness of segregation was still alive and well in America, and he was greeted with that. And a lot of the soldiers in World War II had to be able to make peace with the fact of helping to liberate Europe and the way that they were treated in Europe and the way that they came back home. But he brought that camera back to Rocky Mount, North Carolina, and gave it to a young James Salisbury Jr., my dad. And my dad was so intrigued. It took 609 film, which they don't make anymore. And my dad was just amazed by this camera, and it inspired him. And he went to school at Elizabeth City State, North Carolina, and then went out to Brooks Institute in Santa Barbara, California, and you know, studied under the legendary Boris Dobro. And then went on to, you know, worked at MGM, and my parents moved to Seattle in the 70s. Thought that it would be a great opportunity to come up here, and you know, my dad and people who are from Seattle, you might know the Fax newspaper, and the Fax over the years is not the paper that it once was. It was a, you know, a very big, vibrant newspaper. It's a lot of struggles of Black media all across America. And my dad was a staff photographer there, and a very amazing man named Fitzgerald Beaver believed in my dad's dream of opening a photography studio. And my mom would tell you, my mom and dad, they opened Salisbury Photography almost a half a century ago here in Seattle, and they had just missed the Yellow Pages. And back then, you know, it wasn't no Google, wasn't no Yelp or nothing. If you wasn't in the Yellow Pages, you didn't exist. And my mom tell me the stories. You're like, you know, her and my dad, they go door to door, and he'd have his portfolio. He's like, man, I'm just here. You know what I'm saying? They went door to door. And yeah, I mean, it just tells you something how much my dad believed in his craft and how much my mom believed in him. Because like I said, if you wasn't in the Yellow Pages, man, you ain't exist. You know, and they went door to door through the Central District. And my dad's like, man, you know, I can take these photos. I can do this and that. And they built that business up. You know, I mean, this is a half a century ago. You know, and inspired by that camera. And, you know, oddly enough, my dad actually handed that camera off to me a year ago, which is the camera now is 75 years old, and something, you know, within our family, you know. Unfortunately, my parents got divorced, and Salisbury Photography didn't live on until today. My father's in North Carolina now. But, you know, I grew up in the dark room. I had three years old, man, knew how to, you know, 4 years old, how to process film, you know what I'm saying, and take it from a negative and everything else, and, you know what I'm saying, all the chemicals and mixer and everything. As a small child, I was in the dark room. You know what I'm saying? And working with the enlarger and everything else. And it was man, it was such an amazing experience. And you learn those things. And even my father now, and it's so amazing because, you know, everybody has these cameras that are so much smarter than even the people. But my dad can sit there and he can tell you how light, the actual optics and physics, and how light moves through a lens and all these other kinds of things. And I'll put my dad up against the cheapest camera that you can find, and him doing manually, you know what I'm saying, in his mid-70s, than somebody who's got this best $5,000 whatever camera, because he, you know, he understood and still understands the way the light moves through the lens and the placement, you know, how to properly place you know, if it's a man in a photo or a woman in a photo, and the fundamentals, you know what I'm saying? And it's funny because people give me all kinds of credit for this and that. I'd be like, man, you haven't met my dad. And you know, and just on the note, and of course, when I say my dad, it was both my parents, because you know, like any family business, you know, dad might be out in front, but that engine is mom. You know what I'm saying? And so she was right there. My mom is 70 something. She don't be liking me to say her age. She still does a radio show every week here in Seattle. Every week, and usually her show's put together tighter than mine. And I tell people all the time, coming from my mom and my dad, the media is not on me. It's legitimately in me.
I mean, it's such beautiful stories about it. It is in you. I mean, it's okay. First of all, what is your mom's radio show? Where can people find it? Because I got to go listen to your mom.
Yeah,
because I was about to swear, she's an amazing woman.
Yeah, she's every Monday from 2 to 3 p.m. on KKNW in Seattle, Washington. That's available. I mean, that's 1150 here if you're in Seattle, but also KKNW is online. And man, her show is tight. She is well produced. She cracks the whip. I be feeling like, man, I got to keep up with moms.
I mean, and so then you got the combination of the two of them, because it's not just the visuals stories, it's the art of the interview, you know, and your mom being a radio host. And so that's what I think is so fascinating about the work that you've done. And maybe I'm going to I'll come back to this because it's, you know, it's the layering of the questions and the conversation on top of
we do have to come back.
visuals.
I just want to tell you this. We got to come back because in college, I learned how to splice actual radio tape. Everything's digital right now. And I did play-by-play in college too.
Wow. I mean, you were made for this moment. Do you feel like you were made for this moment?
You know what? And I know that a lot of people who might be watching today or might watch in the future are people who are aspiring. And I want to be able to say this. That's a great question. That, you know, my whole life be honest with you, can I share this moment that we were kind of talking about earlier? It goes right here. So you know, my whole life I call myself the Black Forrest Gump. You know what I'm saying? I went to college for geology, but graduated and was working for AN1 and years ago doing the AN1 mixtapes and the college network. Did a stint with all kinds of big music groups. Wherever the wind would blow, wherever that feather would blow, somehow I find myself there. I went to Tanzania one year just, you know, on vacation. And after 3 days of being there, I was like, man, this is it. You know what I'm saying? And spent years over in East Africa launching TV and radio stations over there. Been to about 25 countries across the continent. Lived in launched a TV station there in Dubai and the United Arab Emirates with the Clouds Media Group Network, and lots of stuff in Europe and in China. And you live that lifestyle. It wasn't the glamorous life, but I knew all the right people. I met so many presidents and heads of state across the continent of Africa, and you know, and had an opportunity to work with ad agencies on all kinds of high level things. And then 2 years ago, and it sounded good, but none of that was my thing. That was a skill that I was able to do. And, you know, working for different companies and everything else, I was able to do something. And a few years ago, I came back home to Seattle. My young boy, who, you know, I took everywhere with me, you know what I'm saying? And ultimately, of course, he had to settle down in his schooling. And he had a few years left at O'Day High School here in Seattle. And I came back home. And, you know, I landed back home and ended up being a thud. I thought that, like, all of these years of all these things that I've learned, and especially in a developing world doing media. I mean, guys got it good here in America, and especially I'm glad that you have a global audience, because especially people who are on the continent or developing country, they know first thing is they wake up, is there power or no power? Was there enough credit in their phone to be able to make a phone call? You know what I'm saying? Did the fiber optic cable to the country get cut? Is there internet? Is the bridge in or out? Is the police going to shake you down? And even there in a lot of media operations, you might write something on your computer, but you got to put it on a USB and go to a internet cafe just to print. It's hard. It's a hard life in media in a developing country. And I came back home with so many skills, And I was like, man, well, let me apply. You know, Amazon is here, Microsoft's here, T-Mobile's here, Nordstrom is here. I'm like, man, somebody should hire me. You know, I even went, I went for like not even quite entry level, but not even like senior this and that. Nobody would hire me. I couldn't get any kind of job in communications and media and anything. Nobody. I couldn't even get an interview. Only I got one interview one time. Was one of those funny call interviews where they ask you like these crazy questions. And you know, I said to myself that with all the skills that I have, I really felt that I was doing a disservice not only to myself but my neighborhood, my community. I said I know so much, I got to do something. So I just started volunteering, you know, at a local organization, Africa Town, and they had space, but they didn't. They were like, man, we're into gentrification and education. What are you talking about, media? I was like, no, just let me build a studio here, and we could do podcasting, and you know, we could make videos about community and everything. Because at that point, I was like, man, I ain't never gonna get a job. Don't nobody want to hire me. You know, let me just use my skills here. Let me reduce my footprint, and let me use my skills to just try to make the community better and invest in my kid and invest in kids in the community. And we started the morning show, and I'm getting to where I'm going. We started the morning show, and COVID hit. We started the morning show because COVID hit. And for me, the best part of the week, it turns out, was when we did the morning show, because I was around people. I lived by myself downtown, and so the weekends of COVID early on, you know what I'm saying, it's changed a bit now. Is nobody went anywhere. If you didn't live with somebody, you were just stuck by yourself. And the weekends would be so depressing. And I remember that weekend, the 29th, you know, and I called my mom earlier in the day. You know, I talked to her a few times a day, and we were talking about what protests might come, because it was the weekend going into, you know, what had happened here with George Floyd. And I remember being at home, and I was so depressed, and I was like, God, I said, I don't know what happened. I said, I'm still at peace. Whatever accomplishments I've made, I've seen this world. I've met some amazing people. But I said, and it's a true story. I've never shared this part of the story with anybody. And I sat at home, you know what I'm saying, with tears in my eyes. And I was just like, you know what? If this is just what it is for me, I'm going to be all right with it. You know, and I'll work for myself. I'm going to figure something out. I'm going to make the community better. And you know, I remember sitting at my apartment, real depressed state. My mom called me. She's like, you know, them protesters is out there right now. I said, what are you talking about, Mom? She said, you go over to this Facebook page, one of the local channels. And I looked, and I saw that was the protester on May 29th. And I said, well, you know what? Let me go cover that. And that's the first part of the story that leads to how I'm here right now. I was at home, you know what I'm saying, depressed, ready to give up. You know what I'm saying? I was like, man, maybe my best days are behind me, but let me make peace with that. And it was a phone call from my mom saying, check the news. And I checked the news, and I walked down a few blocks. I did a video, put it up on my blog, and I'm right here. And sometimes they say in this industry, it's better to be lucky than good. And I'd say it's almost better to be blessed than good. You know, and for people who are listening that are out there, and you've lived a lifetime, and you got so many skills, and you got so many whatever, you know, and people won't hire you because your algorithm isn't right in LinkedIn, and you know, you need to change the word on your LinkedIn profile to perfectly match the job description of whatever. For people that are out there, man, you know what I'm saying? My grandfather used to say, he said, you might give out, but don't give up. And you know, this story and the Converge story is a real deal. You know, I mean, I'm qualified to work in any business here, any business in America. But imagine, because and that's most of the people that Converge are all people who didn't fit the algorithm for LinkedIn. They didn't fit some kind of computer profile. But guess what? We're all here, and we're all thriving.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing that story, because I know that'll touch a lot of people. Because it truly is at those darkest, you know, times when you're feeling depressed, and especially as creatives, that you don't know how to take that step forward, you know, and then in comes your mom, and there's opportunity, and you saw it as such, not knowing what would happen. And the fact that you're that that story mirrors your father and your mother, and not having being in the yellow pages and the going door to door. Like, it's just, and we'll talk about your son a little bit more later, but that it just it's such an incredible story that you saw that as opportunity. And so I'm wondering, for people who aren't familiar with your team at Converge, so it started out your mom telling you to go out, see what they're doing. Fast forward to today, which is July 17th, so not that far from fast forwarding, at July 16th. And tell us about what Converge is today, and how you are proceeding out there with your journalism.
Right. And so, and like that actual business Converge started like 4 years ago, but I mean, it's dormant for the most part. But going out there to the protests, and it was crazy, is that like my friends who are also like creatives, or there's Bobby Steele's the postman for people who might follow the streams, yep. and Eric Calligraphy. And Eric is a photographer. You know what I'm saying? Who, I mean, through life experiences, he can't get no regular job. You know what I'm saying? Bobby Steele's like one of these guys, I mean, he's a videographer, photographer, and a chef, by the way. And so the thing is I'd be out there and it would be dangerous. And those guys were the guys who were just keeping me out of danger. I mean, it's like I really kind of even miss those early days of the stream. I don't miss the tear gas and everything. But it was like, they felt that what I was streaming, I didn't get it at the time. And not because I'm slow, but when you're in the minute, you don't realize it. And it isn't until even later when I hear interviews like this, people are like, no, we followed you and it was this and that. So at the moment, I'm not realizing how important the stream is. But even Bobby Steele's and Eric Calligraphy, they did. And they're like, no, we got to go over here, this and that. I mean, these guys, they took so many rubber bullets and so many this and that, or give me their gas mask. They're like, no, man, you got to be able to breathe. You're doing the stream and everything else. So those guys are here. They're not there anywhere I go. They'll always be there. But what happened is an amazing group of creative people were like, you know what? We want to be a part of this. And I mean, sometimes it comes down to, my mama always says that, what I'm saying, nothing occurs before its time. I think most creative people can say, it's like, man, if I just had a person who knew how to do the SEO and the whatever, if I just had a person who could go and edit this up, and that was Converge's story. It's like, man, my commitment has always been there. I could create the content, I could dance to people, I could talk, I could do whatever people want to do, but I just didn't have enough resource. And in 2 days, every kind of person that Converge could ever need was here. Somebody who knows the back end, like my website, I'll be honest, it was crap. These guys, Jordan showed up, and now it's this and that, it's integrated or whatever. Nikki, you know what I'm saying, who's just amazing, and she's like the whip. She whips everything in order over here and keeps everything going. And she's a marketing and sales genius, and that's what you need. All you who, I mean, before we just had the cheapest camera, the cheapest whatever, and people donated. And so we put all the donation back into equipment. So now we got these Black Magic 6Ks, and I'm still scared to touch them. But she's a genius. You know what I'm saying? We've got Jake, who's another photojournalist, who's just, who's come into play. And then the people from our original team over at Africa Town, Daryl and Treyana and Hans. And it's like, speaking of a LinkedIn, I could have never found these people on any computer algorithm. These were the people who rose to the occasion. They said, man, we like what Converge is doing. And by the way, I'm an expert in this. And so believe that I went from sitting there at home May 29th, ready to just give up on this whole career and just move on to something else, to here it is 50 plus days later. I got some of the best people in the world that are working on this Converge platform.
I paused because I don't know if you could see my arms. It gives me chills, it's when you believe that all of those things can come together and people step up, and and it's such an amazing thing, and the work continues and grows stronger, and it's, or maybe not grows stronger, but just more eyes, I guess. And so I'm curious, what shifted for you? Did anything shift for you as all of a sudden now people are putting their eyes on you, and NBC is doing a story on you? You're out there doing the stories, and then all of a sudden, what happened for you then, and how did that shift things?
Well, I'll be honest with you, and for the most part, nothing is shifting. And in the reason being is that early on, so in college, like I said, I learned radio from one of the best, Greg Sampson, rest in peace, at WRVS 89.9 ECSU in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, and I learned the fundamentals of radio. And like I said, one of my first jobs out of there were amazing jobs. I worked for the Basketball Network and for And1 and all these other things. And for the first few years, I went to every NBA All-Star game, and I was a celebrity journalist and everything else. And I went through that in my 20s, and I went through the limelight and everything amazing about it, and the ups and downs and everything else. And so at this most important juncture in our city, when total concentration is required and commitment and dedication, it's a blessing to be able to say that for the most part, unfazed. But I'm only unfazed probably because of that phase that I went through early on in my life. And so I'm able to sit here and be like, nah, I'm good. No, it's okay. And, I'm still the same guy. I'm able now, with all these things going on, to just be like, after work, I just go home. But because, 2 decades ago, when it was like, oh, it's NBA, or it's an event, a record label or whatever, and could hang out all night because it was a novel thing then. And so sometimes it's like, man, things align at the right time. And so I've been able to take all the publicity, and like I said, there's no major news network on earth that I haven't been on as part of the story, or even a contributor to the story. But, I'm really proud to say that I'm still the same Odo. My phone number hasn't changed. I still answer every phone call. I just feel bad. And sincerely, I feel bad. And I'm going to make time when this slows down, because so many people send me emails. So many people send me messages of support and everything else. My mama said that you always got to be able to get back to people. And so I would tell you, it might take me a year to get back to everybody who's written, in support and everything, but I'm going to do that. And I think that's one of the things that's probably changed, is that I'm not able to return acts of kindness and sincerity as instantly as I used to. But, I tell people all the time, when it comes to act of kindness, I have a memory of an elephant. So it might be a year from now, but, people are here from me. But, the best thing is my life hasn't changed. And another thing I say is that, I've been unfortunate to witness some very tragic and inhumane events here in the chop zone. You know what I'm saying? The murder of Lorenzo Anthony, the murder of Antonio Mays Jr. And I was on the freeway when Summer Taylor and Diaz Love were ran over, and of course Summer Taylor ended up passing away. And I saw most of that with my eyes, and some of this stuff on the stream. And I'm proud to say that, we never sold any footage. We've never sold any footage to anybody, because that's not why we're here. 2, every time there was a tragedy here, I never did an interview. I didn't want anything to be about me, and things like that. And I think that, and those are things that we're really proud of, in the sense of people who are in the creative space. It's a lot of people here on this pain and tragedy and inhumanity that's occurred that, they've gone a different route with it. But this is my city, and I love my city. I love Seattle. And I think that, the Emerald City being the place that we all want it to be, it takes a commitment to be like, hey, let's think in the long game, and let's not think in the short game.
What have you learned about yourself, having experienced the trauma of everything that you have seen? Have you learned anything about yourself that you thought to be true?
Well, I would say is that as the tears fall from my eyes, I would say that seeing all of that, and this is our 50th whatever day of continuous coverage, and it was really going down. It was like 40 plus days of continuous coverage of of some of anything could happen is that I found out, and I'm glad I didn't surprise myself. I found out that I was who I thought I was. And sometimes, it's a blessing. This is a tragedy, a lot of tragedies around it, but sometimes people live a whole lifetime, and because of fate or fortune, they're never put to the test. you know, and people leave this earth sometimes untested. And I didn't know the outcome, but I was hopeful. But I'm thankful for this test. I'm thankful. I'm thankful that no matter what happens past tomorrow, that man, when it was time, and when Converge was called, that man, we lived up to it. And all those things that were in my mind, and a lot of people might be watching in their mind, like, man, I could do this if I just had an opportunity. I could do this if someone just gave me a crack through the door. I could do this if someone just called my number. I'm sure it's a lot of people that are out there. And man, to get your number called and to be an unknown, 40 days ago, 40 plus days ago, and today there's not a city council member I can't call. I just did a interview with the council president. There's not any network person in America, ABC, NBC, CNN, that I can't call somebody. There's not a local channel here that I can't call, TV or radio and everything else. And to know that it's like sometimes we just needed that break, that opportunity, a little shelter from the rain. And so one of the things that I did learn, and that I'm glad that I got tested, is that everything that I thought that I could do, that my parents told me they could do, that all the friends who, when I doubted myself, reaffirmed me, like, man, oh, you can't give up. You're the man. You can do this. You can do that. And being able to show them and show the world, like, yeah, it's all good. And I think the other thing is that man, I've learned to respect a lot of other people's positions. People talk about police and policing, and a lot of the calls here in Seattle are mental health. And when there was no police in CHOP, the biggest issue here was people with mental health, and nobody knew how to deal with them. So you learn empathy. You know what I'm saying? Or for the protesters, I'd interview protesters, and they would just be at the barricade, and they'd just be yelling and yelling, and I'd be like, "Well, are you peaceful here? Do you wish anybody harm?" They said, "I don't want to hurt nobody. I'm just so frustrated. My pain is so much of the anger that they felt." And you learn empathy. You know what I'm saying? And you learn empathy for the protester, and you learn empathy for the police, and you learn empathy for the medics. And with that empathy, it creates a sense of hopefulness that, you know what, our city isn't through yet. There's still space yet. There's still so many good people that are out here in the Emerald City. And I think that if there's one thing that I've learned through the Seattle protests, is that, man, the best of Seattle is yet to come. The roadmap hasn't been quite finalized yet, but you know what? There's enough people determined on all sides of the issues to ensure that we get there.
Whew. Makes me proud to be a Seattleite.
There you go. Let's go, Ems.
I mean, it's so powerful for creatives of all types, not just people who are interested in journalism, that, there is no direct path to something. And nobody's path is ever going to be the same. And so we were talking before going live about your son. And so I'm curious, because of just what you're talking about, your parents kind of always realizing that everything that they instilled in you is who you are when you were put to the test. So your son has been along with you for this journey as well. Tell us about him and what you're seeing develop for him as a creator.
Right. So, even though he's taller than me now, so he won't let me call him little O. He went by young O for a while now. I think it's just O. But what's crazy about this guy is, early on in my career, like I said, I used to take him everywhere. And I got pictures and video of him being like 5 years old and us being on Choice FM, 102.5 Choice FM, over in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and it was me and little O was my co-host. You know what I'm saying? And 5 years old, and 7 years old, and we used to. I mean, his whole timeline, 5, 7, 9, almost every 2 years, he would be there when in TV stations or meeting. You know, did a lot of concerts and stuff over there, meeting celebrities and things like that. And I mean, I was always on the road and moving around, and he was with me as much as possible, more than his older sister, and of course his younger sister. He was just in that age. Um, and when we moved up to Abu Dhabi and UAE, you know, he was there, and I always felt bad because you know other parents, my friends, you know, their kid, they were at every football game or basketball game and every first and this and that, and you know, a lot of times I was, man, chasing a dream that overseas and never, you know, this is what I imagine what Converge is right now, that I imagine being overseas. And I chased that for years. And those long flights give you enough time to cry all the tears out before you land back in Seattle so you can be composed because you're disappointed. But I used to take this boy with me everywhere. And you know, it wasn't until we got to Loyola in Chicago, and that's where he's at, Loyola University of Chicago, last year, freshman orientation. I try not to pressure him too much. So you know, he was like, I don't know what I want to study yet or whatever. And we got to orientation. I said, well, son, you know, it's good to have a plan. What you want to do? He said, Dad, I'm gonna study broadcast journalism. And it went into that moment. I'll be honest with you. I felt like a failure as a parent. I said, man, I took this boy everywhere. He wasn't committed in football or in piano or something and this and that. And he was like, man, Dad, you don't understand. He said, I'm gonna be just like you, but better. You know, I mean, it was such an amazing moment there on the campus of Loyola in Chicago, because I really thought that I failed this young man. And I really thought that, you know, taking him in and out of this radio station or this meeting or this whatever, you know, that I had failed him, because it wasn't a football practice or it wasn't a recital and everything else. And it was being there and realizing that it was like, man, you know, I, it's hard to even put in words. But this guy now, he's you know, he's getting ready to go in his second year over at Loyola. They got to figure out the online thing. But he's one of the producers here. He has a show here tonight that he produces called Good Game Alert. You know what I'm saying? And it's about a show about how to reach marginalized people in the Black community in Seattle. You know, people who might have been in prison or getting out, or they're on the verge of maybe doing some things they shouldn't. And that's what his show is all about. Is highly rated here. And you know, I mean, like I said, when we were there in the protest. And it was his first protest. You know, he'd never seen nothing like that, but he wanted to come. And of course, the mama didn't want him to come. And I said, you know, I told her, like, yeah, I'll keep him safe. And I'm like, geez, how am I going to do this? And we're over there. The cars are on fire, the police cruisers. And I'm on one end of the block, he's on the other, and the SPD, they throw the tear gas and the big canisters, they land in between us. Now, I know in my mind, if he stays on that corner, he's going to be okay. And I stay on my corner, I'm going to be okay. We didn't have any gas masks or anything. That was the first day. And so I stayed on my corner, but this boy runs through the clouds of tear gas. And he grabs me. He's like, come on, Dad, we're down here. We're down here. So then we run. So we really went through the tear gas twice. And then we run back through the tear gas and get to the corner. Inhale so much tear gas, can't breathe. You know, the medics are there that poured oat milk on us in our face and everything else. And I said, son, what's going on? He said, man, I couldn't leave you over there, Dad. He said, besides, you too old right now. You couldn't even run if you wanted to. You know, and it's just, well, what amazes me about him is I think that he has both his grandma and his grandfather's sense of empathy, seriousness, and caring all in one. You know, and he's well on his way. And I tell him that, you know, although I learned radio at WRVS, you know, I actually graduated with a degree in geology, of all things. And I said, son, I've learned this media business in bits and pieces. I said, I have way more failures than I have successes, you know, and on those failures is what's prepared me for this moment. But I said, imagine you're going to school and you're going to learn all the things that I had to burn my fingers learning. So, you know, give this guy about another 10, 15 years. You'll be looking up another Omari Salisbury. The better looking one.
The taller one.
Exactly.
My goodness. I'm really excited to see, what it just what he creates as well. But I want to make sure where you just mentioned that his show. And so where is it that people, I still have a couple more questions, but where is it that people can find his show?
So it's our Facebook page is the easiest place. Is Converge Media on Facebook. Believe it or not, up until 40 days ago, you had to scroll down to like the 50th Converge Media on Facebook. But right now, we're probably number one. Number two, it's a little blue logo, Converge Media. It's called Good Game Alert.
Good Game Alert. Awesome. I have two things I want to talk about before closing out. And the first one is you coming back around to this, citizen journalism, that we all have the ability, or because you're not bound by, like you said, by tools. You're going out there with your iPhone, that anybody can be part of this. And you said, I think it's on your Instagram sort of header, through communications, all things are possible.
100%.
What is it about for you about this the journalism part, the communications part, the talking versus just the visual, that makes you believe that anything is possible?
Well, I mean, and one part of it is, like I said, when people tell me all the time, and I've lived my whole life to be here at this moment, one part on the talking, like I said, I used to be color commentary at WRVS, men's and women basketball. So I was used to just painting a picture for people who couldn't see. They weren't there in the basketball arena because it was radio. It's like moving left to right across your dial. Mighty Vikings inbound, they're going over the zones. They're sitting there at center court. So, I mean, that's early on in my training. I hadn't used that skill in 20 years. But I think that for me, for the communication part, one thing that really made me reinforce communication is traveling and seeing that so much of the world, when you really get friends overseas, well, all of us know people, but when you're really there on the birth of a baby or the death of an elder, and then you realize that it's like, man, we all celebrate, and then we all cry and mourn the same. And it kind of clicks in your mind that it's like, man, we might not be as different as people are trying to tell us. I think that maybe if we could focus on communication, if we can learn how to communicate with each other and start with just the simple things, start with a birth, start with a death, start with a happy feeling, all of those kind of things. And it's really become a focus to me of how can we better communicate. And that started, because you live in a country and people think if you're black and you go to Africa, it's all good. I mean, and people always treated me good, but I faced a lot of discrimination around language barrier. I didn't speak Swahili, so now I had to learn it. Kusema Kiswahili kidogo, you know what I'm saying? But I had to learn it. And because I wanted to be able to communicate, and I wanted the people to understand that I was sincere in my communication, and I didn't want them to have to transfer to English. I said, man, I value my relationships here. Let me learn Swahili. For a while, I was in Mozambique. I learned some Portuguese as well, and a few other African languages, some French, and I speak a hodgepodge of everything these days. But understanding, if we can talk to somebody, if we can find a sense of empathy, if we can find a starting point about anything. In so many places around the world, it's football because, everybody plays soccer. You might start there. You might say, I love Liverpool. I love, what I'm saying, any of the other teams. You might be into Barcelona or, in UEFA, but it's a starting point. And for me, if I can start a conversation, and people who saw the streams, I talked to the Proud Boys, I talked to the alt-right, I've talked to all kinds of people from the far left and everything else, because ultimately, if I can still understand, I don't have to agree with you. But man, I can make a commitment to understand, and in that understanding, I can relay it to someone else. Communication is so important.
I haven't been feeding you some of the comments that have been coming in from people online, but as
only the good ones, please.
I want to share what a couple of people are saying. I mean, Tenderheart on YouTube just said, it's called loving one another, in terms of this
Amen.
conversation.
Amen.
I want to, earlier talking about little O or young O, and Karina Reed was saying, way to go, Dad. She's watching from Canada. We
Hey.
have Catherine Donnell, who is saying, thank you for sharing this history. Wow, going back to when you were talking about your parents. Coral is tuning in from Tasmania, Australia. Paul from New Zealand, and
Wow.
they keep coming in. Melbourne, Bessie in Melbourne, Australia. So lots of people who are
Wow.
very much appreciating everything that you're telling us. And what I want to end with is, you mentioned that you haven't sold any of your footage, which is incredible, and for, so many reasons. But you are a group of people who are working your tails off day in and day out, and you are self-supported, community supported,
Community
and
support.
community supported. And so I just want to ask you how people can support what you're doing. And also then, I guess, along with that, where can people find you, follow you, all the things, because, this is just a point in time. July 20, what day is it? July 16th. And there is, the story continues. I mean, we didn't even start talking about your, what's going on in our city, at least with the mayor. And, there's just, you're just
Yeah.
continuing
What
the coverage. So where can people find you and follow you and
All right.
support you?
Well, thank you. So, I mean, all in one place. It will be our website, Where We Converge. By the time I got a domain, convergemedia.com was been gone. But I think even our domain kind of fits us because it's whereweconverge.com, and it's really true to that. Um, I'm on and I'm at our website, Where We Converge. You can .com. You can find like donation and stuff like that. We're also at Converge Media across a lot of big platforms. People know Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. It's just Converge Media. Um, for me, I'm on Twitter at Omari Sal, OMARISAL. Man, follow me. But I love to comment with people. I love to talk to them and things like that. And can Converge Media across all platforms. So on Twitter at Converge Media, Instagram Converge Media, Facebook Converge Media. And one thing that people might not realize, especially when you go to our social media, is that there's me and there's streaming, but we have so many amazing photographers, calligraphy, Nikki, Jake, and they've documented the protest season. And so we've been putting all kinds of photos up on our Instagram and things like that. And so a lot of visual artists can see their work as well.
Absolutely. Make sure you are following, from all of those places. We'll have all the links in the show notes as well. You've got the morning show update
Morning
every
show
day
is
as
there.
well.
Yeah. Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We have the morning update show. We do a show Wednesday from 6 to 7 called Community Voices. And we're constantly Young O show, Good Game Alert. You know what I'm saying? That's every Thursday at 7 p.m. and a lot of other stuff that we do. We want to, the thing is, people donated to us to be able to buy equipment and stuff. And so one of the things that we've done is we've bought this equipment, and we've also opened up our space for other aspiring media people and other people who just needed that crack in the door, like I did. You know what I'm saying? And so people are already coming now. They record their shows to put on their platforms here. And we don't charge anybody anything. And because we got some really great equipment thanks to the generosity of people, you know what I'm saying, around the world. And the last thing I want to do is be able to shut the door on that creative person who was like myself, who just needed an opportunity.
Omari, Big O, I mean, you are just a gem of a human being. I'm so grateful to have spent the last hour plus with you, and to be able to introduce you to folks around the world who may not have been familiar yet with you, your story, your coverage. And I really appreciate your vulnerability and honesty, about where you've been and the challenges and the ups and downs, because as creators, that's what people don't always talk about, and that's what we're here to talk about. And so highly encourage everybody to, again, go see, go follow, go into the front lines with Omari, with whatever it is that he's covering and doing. So
can I say one thing here real quick?
Please. Yes,
I just
please.
want to tell everybody who's out there is like, man, do what you can with what you have. If we would have waited here for the right camera or the right light or this or that, or my friend who says he can grip, but he hasn't called me back or anything like that, we wouldn't be here right now. It was just like, man, what I had was a cell phone, 3-4-year-old iPhone, and just a want to be able to tell the story. So wherever you're at in the world and everything else, you know what I'm saying? Do what you can with what you have. And I mean, and because of that effort and that belief, now I have all kinds of production stuff that I could never even dream of. But it was the fact of just getting after it. Just go get it with whatever tool that you might have.
Thank you so much. I was going to ask you for final words of wisdom, and there you go. Thank you again so much. And I, again, look forward to following everything that you're doing. And it's been an honor and pleasure for everybody out there. Thank you for tuning in and for your comments from all over the world. You can see what is coming up here on CreativeLIVE, CreativeLIVE TV, and we will see you next time. Thank you again for tuning in, and that's a wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Chase Jarvis, founder and CEO of CreativeLIVE. You all know that we have more than 2,000 classes and more than 1,000 hours of learning, inspirational, and motivational content on the platform. I'm super excited to announce a new experience on CreativeLIVE. It's called Fast Class. You've told us that you're busy and sometimes it's hard to dive into a full class from start to finish. So essentially, we're now giving you a shortened highlight version of our top CreativeLIVE classes. You can always dive into the full class with 5, 10, or 15 hours of great content. But now, if you're just looking to focus on a few of the highlights or want to be able to skip quickly to something that really interests you, you can now get a shortened fast class version of that class. We're also thinking this might be able to help you explore a new craft and save time while doing it. This is a great tool to curate your learning experience to help create the life that you seek. So you're probably thinking, great, how do I access this new experience on CreativeLIVE? That's easy. All you have to do is be a subscriber to the Creator Pass, and then all this is yours. If you're feeling isolated and looking for creative connection, try tuning into creativelive.com/TV. That's where we've got a 24/7 live stream from the kitchen counters.
I can do that backlit shot that I really like to do.
From the studios and living rooms of many of the world's top creators, where we're doing musical performances, Q&As, cooking shows, virtual book tour events, drawing, spoken word poetry, and more.
Life passed me by waiting for an invitation when the world is greater than my nation or my occupation. Be someone you've never been. You feel all that adrenaline, it's medicine.
It actually helps me feel like my days are more purposeful.
I hope that out of this deep pain will come some collective growth.
Dive into CreativeLIVE TV today.